Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name's Ross, and we have a great presentation set up for you today with Cathy Breden. She's going to tell us, look into her crystal ball and let us know what's going to happen the rest of this year. And hopefully she'll be right, like she usually is, with all her statistics. We want to thank our sponsors to get started with, too. We have B Matrix, the exhibit company, Image Options, and Classic Exhibits for helping us with all these presentations. And yeah, let's just get started. You guys are here to hear Cathy. And I apologize if you hear any trees being cut in the background. I'm trying to mute myself. You're muted. You're muted, Cathy. Wait, hang on.
Rookie mistake.
Oh, there we go.
The garbage trucks were coming by just as you were introducing me. So at least it's not, the trees being chopped down. But at any rate, thank you so much for having me here again with you. Ross reminded me that it was about this time last year that I was with all of you. And Natural Products Expo was shut down that day, or actually the day before, and I had to redo my presentation because what I was going to present wasn't entirely applicable. So I am going to share my screen here, and hopefully everybody can see that. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, good. So we're going to be talking today about navigating what's going on, as well as what we're seeing for the end of this year and into 21 and 22. I certainly don't have a crystal ball. A lot of what I use is research data, which does seem to be very accurate, especially when you start seeing the same trends across other surveys, both within the industry, but also outside the industry, like consumer sentiment surveys and things like that. So let's go ahead and get started. I would encourage you to put your questions in the chat. Also, just share your ideas with one another in the chat. I know that this session is being recorded, and maybe Ross can share the chat after the session so that you can keep track of perhaps some ideas that you're sharing with one another, what's working, what's not working, things like that. So this is what I kind of feel like over the last 12 months, certainly trying to keep your head above water. We were talking before all of you came on that it feels like that I'm in suspended animation. One day evolves into the next, into the next, and into the next. And as one of my good friends said, gosh, sometimes I feel like I've lost my mojo because we've been so secluded for this last year. So hopefully we're coming out of that. And I can tell you that in December, I would have said that, I was hopeful, and in January, I would have said I'm cautiously optimistic, and now I'm saying I'm optimistic about the industry coming back this year. And hopefully some of these slides that you'll be seeing will help to reinforce why I feel that way. First off, I'm going to talk about Sears Global Event Trends Study. This is a study that was conducted in January of this year and it was a true global event study with about 5 different countries participating. So we have a good perspective globally, which is always good. So certainly what we are seeing is, one or more offerings. I'm sorry, I need to move this thing across the top of the screen and get it out of my way. I can't see. There, I'll move it down to, well, that's not going to work either. I'm sorry, hold on a second. All right, well, we'll just go with it. So looking at what this is from the exhibition organizer perspective. So this gives you that perspective of what the organizers are thinking right now. And at least for this year, 88% of them are looking at doing one or more virtual options. Lots of education sessions online, 74%. Exhibitor promotional content, providing the buyers with that content from the exhibitors. Some of them, 54% are saying full virtual trade show that they're going to be doing this year. And a lot of them are recording and pushing out general session content. One of the things that we're seeing is that they are recording these virtual events, if you will. I think that they're better called digital events because this certainly isn't virtual. But pushing out the content both during and after the event to keep that event living on. And then the likelihood of digital offerings continuing into 2022. Certainly organizers are hedging their safety by making sure that they do have some type of fallback stance in the event that they're not able to hold that live event. Certainly, a lot of skittishness out there in the marketplace, lots of unknowns in terms of events coming back online and what does that look like, and so on and so forth. Certainly some events have been held and have been successful, as I'm sure that you have all seen in the trade news, and do anticipate this picking up, as you'll see a little bit later in the presentation. Okay. All right. So we know, again, this is from the organizer's perspective. So keep that in mind. The sweet spot between the education and the branding, or what the motivators are for the corporate marketers to participate versus what the motivators are for the attendees to participate. Top 3 reasons organizers believe professionals are motivated to attend their event. It's obviously the education, keeping up with industry trends. That's something that has shown up over and over and over in Sears studies. Also, professional certification requirements. Certainly with the pause on live events, where many of these recertification requirements or certification requirements were completed, they've had to move this all online. And seeing and experiencing new technology and new products. Whereas the top 3 reasons why they believe that exhibitors, the corporate marketers, are participating is sales lead generation, branding and face-to-face engagement, which is also something that continuously shows up in Sears studies as it relates to attending and participating in a live event. We know that on the brand marketer side and what the organizers are offering, certainly the virtual exhibit booths, although I don't think it's a virtual booth per se, it's more of a presence in a marketplace. Interactive products and service directories at 70%, and then also offering a lot of marketing, advertising, and sponsorship opportunities. And I think that one of the things that we are learning, at least with the technology as it stands today, is that this 2D environment that is a digital environment just isn't very conducive to conducting business. Now that certainly, may change as the technology advances, but certainly right now we are seeing that that the value of that virtual event, the value proposition is much less. I don't know how many of you were listening to the exhibitor media webinar that was conducted yesterday with their recent Pulse poll findings, but the exhibitors in that survey, 86% said that they received far fewer leads from participating in a digital event versus 11% who said that they found no value in terms of generating leads. So, again, I think that this all bodes well for the live event experience. And one of the things that I think it's very important for organizers and for you to also discuss with your clients as these digital events continue, perhaps, is looking at how they might be able to convert some of the the funding over to sponsorships in terms of perhaps leading an education session or speaking, or what other opportunities might there be to be able to position them to help them at least gain some more leads, hopefully. We're seeing that there are two different types of virtual or digital events. One of them is that, where they're trying to replicate how it looks. You walk into the lobby of the convention center and move around from that point, versus the other part where there is a presence with tiles where you access the exhibitor that way, rather than I think that on the replication of that convention center lobby, for instance, that's kind of replication of what we would think of as virtual. But if you think about that digital event, it really is nothing more than a media event. So on the IAEE side, the International Association of Exhibitions Events, as most of you know, I'm the COO. When we did Expo, we made a very conscious decision that we did not want to replicate what that live event looked like. We wanted it to have a totally separate perspective and view that this is a digital event, because there's no way that you can replicate that live event. This is just an image of virtual events and what we are seeing. They're certainly smaller and shorter on average. We see that they are anywhere from 8 hours a day down to 4 or 5 hours, and they might be held over a full week period of time. Perhaps the digital marketplace might be held during 2 or 3 days, but certainly extending that over a longer period of time. And then also making the education sessions themselves much shorter. We're seeing that because of the unreliability of Wi-Fi, for instance, that the sessions are pre-recorded, which takes a lot more time on the part of the exhibition organizer. And so certainly I think that 59 minutes, for instance, in terms of an average number of minutes for an education session is entirely too long. I would say, more like 20 minutes with a Q&A and a conversation following that presentation. We also conduct a pulse poll. We've conducted several of them, 3 of them since COVID began. And we know from our January 21 survey that the exhibition organizer executives are expected to take a tremendous hit again this year. 73% of them indicated that that this would be an extreme impact, and that 73% has not changed since the 2020 June survey. We know that more have postponed this year rather than cancel, which is really good news. And of course, they were forced to make the decision, obviously, from unknown about the capacity of the convention center and what the state regulations were going to be. So certainly, many of them were forced into postponing. They did not want to cancel. We also know that revenue, on average, 47% revenue loss, and what we are seeing also that the dates have been pushed back to Q3 and Q4 of this year. I'm sure that the contractors are on this call, as well as the convention center representatives. You can probably attest to that there is probably going to be, and probably already is, a real fierce competition for dates and space in Q3 and Q4 of this year. One of the things I did want to talk about just before we move into the next slide is that it was interesting that you may know that Freeman released in a study that said 78% of attendees and exhibitors will return in the fall, as we know, and that's up from 60% from last month, the previous month. And then the other thing that was interesting from that exhibitor media webinar yesterday was the comment, it has cancellation, postponement of trade shows made the value of exhibiting more obvious to upper management. And 43% said yes, 34% said not sure, and no, 23%. And one of the things, perhaps is happening, and I think this would be a great thing for us to talk about, is certainly with the pause in live events being held, have marketers looked at other marketing channels as a part of their overall omni marketing plan in terms of, connecting with that customer. So what does that look like? And so I have a poll, and I don't know if you're able to pull up the poll, and if not, then we're just going to do it the old-fashioned way. So here's the question. During the pandemic, corporate marketers had to find other ways to connect to their customers, shifting to other marketing channels. When face-to-face fully returns, do you believe exhibitors will fully return to exhibiting at the pre-pandemic level? So if you will select one of those, please, and then Ross can show us the results.
Still got people doing it. Give it, oh, there we go.
So 59% said yes, it will return, 36% no, and then 5% just don't know. You know what? I'm really not surprised by those results. I can tell you that McKinsey & Company, you can look up this on the McKinsey website, released this morning, looking at the question was, in what ways is your company's product or service sold during COVID-19? And then what ways was your company's product or services sold before COVID-19? So you can see that in August of last year, it dramatically dropped. And certainly, back again now this year, top 3 ranked effective by respondents is e-commerce 41, in-person 37, and video conference 31. So I just put that out there because I don't know, and I think it's just something that we need to keep an eye on. Certainly e-commerce has been the way that people have shopped over this last year. We've been talking for years and years about how e-commerce is going to impact the B2B exhibitions industry. And then, certainly video conferences. So what's that going to look like in the future? And then over the next 5 years, how do you think COVID will affect your industry's cost and investments in each of the following? So sales meetings and customer events. By the availability of in-person customer interaction doesn't mean sellers are going back. So 15% say they are likely to be in person 76 to 100% of the time, whereas 47% say they are likely to be in person less than half of that time. So again, just keeping an eye on what these trends look like during these pulse polls that are going out, as we're, throughout the pandemic, as well as when we begin recovering, what's that going to look like? And are these going to hold true? Now, granted, this wasn't focused especially on, B2B events, but it's across all events. But I do think that it is an interesting stat just to keep an eye on. So probably what you are all here about is looking at economic impact and recovery of the industry. What does that look like? And we know that consumer sentiment is something that we have been tracking over the last year very closely through a lot of different surveys. We knew from Dr. Shaw that we needed serious economists, that one of the metrics that we're watching very closely is the rollout of the vaccines and the downward COVID cases. And that would then trigger business recovery. So we know that that's the case, and that all bodes well for where we are today. Oh, gosh, sorry. All right, so this is from Destination Analysis, and they've been doing a pulse poll as well throughout this whole event. And this one that I received this week, at this moment, how safe would you feel doing each type of travel activity? And you'll see that 51.8% said that they would feel safe attending a conference or a convention. This is dramatically increased over their previous pulse polls. So this is a good stat to watch as well. And I think that we're going to, again, be seeing a return to face-to-face as the vaccinations, as more receive those vaccinations. And the average daily rate of new COVID cases, as I mentioned, it's been going down. We're still not out of the woods yet because we don't know what the impact of the variants are and what's the impact of the states opening up with no restrictions whatsoever. And we can't account for human behavior and what humans do and what they believe about wearing masks or not wearing masks. So, certainly with President Biden's commitment, if he's actually able to achieve it, of 100 million vaccinations and everybody being vaccinated by the end of May, is another key stat to watch, because as soon as people start feeling safe and those travel bans begin being lifted, it's going to bode well for people returning face-to-face. In the exhibitor media webinar yesterday, they mentioned that 84% of corporate marketers that responded to that survey, 73%, I believe, of those that responded, or 75%, that those travel bans are still in place. So the previous stat was 83 or 84%. So that number has gone down, which is good, but certainly it needs to keep going lower. So what was the economic impact? We know from 2019 that the economic impact from face-to-face trade shows not being held, the 2019 impact of shows being held was 105 billion. And last year we had forecasted to go up to 105 billion. And actually it only generated 24 billion. And that was only because of those few large shows that were able to be held in January and February of last year. So it was a significant economic impact. And the sad thing is that if you hearing me having talked previously that in 2019, we had finally recovered from the Great Recession. So it took those 10 years for the exhibition industry to get back to where the total index was in 2009. We are not forecasting that length of time is going to be necessary during this recovery. So this is a real GDP versus the SEER total index, and this is in 2020, looking at 2020, and you'll see that GDP declined, but certainly the exhibition industry just absolutely bottomed out. So it is certainly not surprising. And GDP is certainly boosted by continuing reopening of businesses and strong residential investment in other online and consumer good purchases. The underlying fundamentals of the economy and what the index tracks are still very, very strong. So housing starts, certainly very strong. Housing and trucks and autos and things like that, especially trucks, are still very strong. So looking at what those underlying fundamentals, certainly productivity of workers is substantially down, and that's something that we want to also be watching as the industry recovers. And then looking back in 2009, this compares to what happened in 2009 real GDP against the SEER total index. And again, you'll just see that it just absolutely plummeted, as we all know. So this gives us good information in terms of what we need to do and what we need to watch in order to come back. And then this is just another image showing that this is excluding canceled events. So these are the events that were able to be held and what the decline was in the 4 metrics that SEER tracks in the index. So you'll see that net square feet's down, exhibitors, attendees, and certainly the real revenues is generated from those 3 metrics. So certainly not surprising perhaps, but those that were able to get their events off the ground, as well as, those events that were able to be held in the 4th quarter of last year. So we know, we think that the worst is behind us. The peak of daily average number of cases occurred in late January, but we don't know what's going to happen with spring break, in the states that have totally reopened without any restrictions and, back to that human behavior that we just can't control. We know that by Q3 of this year, enough Americans should be protected and achieve herd immunity. So that's good to know. Looking at what the growth will be of the total index versus real GDP, you'll see that in 2020, the index again declined 78%. In 2021, it'll be down 57% from 2019, and then in 2022 down 10%. So what I am saying is that we will start seeing recovery occurring toward the Q3 and Q4 of this year, and then really gaining momentum next year, if in fact everything remains the same. And you may have heard that that the Exhibitions and Conferences Alliance has been formed with the Exhibitions Mean Business, which falls under IAEE. Their campaign, along with Go Live Together, are now existing under the Exhibitions and Conferences Alliance. And all of this data that SEER produces goes into providing these economic impact numbers, as well as the number of exhibitors and attendees and all of that type of stuff. And I was talking to Ross just before I got on the call, and I'll show you in a minute of what we have done. But I participated yesterday in U.S. Travel's destination Capitol Hill, where we U.S. Travel arranged one-on-one visits with our congressional representatives and our senators, and asked for specific relief for the exhibitions and events industry, as well as travel overall. U.S. Travel primarily focuses on leisure travel. More so in the past couple of years, they're focusing a lot more on business travel. And you'll see, the hit that the economy took from that loss of travel. So one of our asks is safely restoring business travel meetings and events, and trying to get across again to our congressional representatives, as well as to the different states, that we can differentiate trade shows from other type of events that have been considered mass gatherings. And we are asking Congress to establish a cap on risk controls, as well as establishing a cost-sharing program to cover the pandemic risk and business interruption and event cancellation insurance. That was one of the things that the organizer side of the industry really took a big hit on. And of course, that really trickled down to the exhibitors and the attendees and all of that. And certainly providing some liability protections for businesses as well, I think is something that certainly the Exhibitions and Conferences Alliance, this is one of their big issues, is providing that, is getting that liability protection. So as well, ask them for, there's an act, Hospitality and Commerce Job Recovery Act. which provides a temporary business tax credit, restores the entertainment business expense deduction, and also provides an individual tax credit for qualified travel expenses, as well as tax relief for restaurants and food and beverage companies. So these are all things that are being worked on behind the scenes that, many think, well, what's the industry doing? Well, the industry is really doing a lot. These are just some of the news outlets that I have been interviewed by. I mean, I was telling Ross, whoever would have thought that Wall Street Journal would be calling me? But these are all of the media outlets. And again, all of this data that's created by not only SEER, but by exhibitor media and, just all of these across all of the industry organizations. It's really important. So, I urge you to keep the faith and know that there are a lot of different organizations that are working on your behalf. And then thoughts on planning in terms of what we are telling our organizer representatives. We suggested to them, postpone your events. If you were in Q1 or Q2 of this year, look at doing the events in Q3 and 4, if at all possible. Also suggested, considering that hybrid model, but also remembering that if you do a hybrid model, that to consider that digital event should be thought of and planned totally separate from that live event, because they really are two events. We also suggested looking at, how do you provide for safety of the attendees, and certainly we have seen some shows that have occurred that they were able to do that very safely. And then also just, be realistic about expected outcomes, also working very closely together with your exhibitor partners in terms of, some flexibility there, as well as the convention center partners, just all of the contractors. Everybody needs to really work very closely together right now to look at how do we keep costs down and make sure that the event is as successful as possible for those exhibitors. And with that, that is I believe that's my overview. I did put in here, and I'll send this deck off afterward, some of the other SEER research reports that have been produced that you might find helpful. And with that, that is my email address if anybody would like to contact me separately. So thank you for your time today, and I'm happy to answer any questions, as well as, to the extent possible, having a conversation on Zoom.
Right on. Thanks, Cathy.
That was great. Very informative. If anybody has any questions, you can raise their hand and I can unmute you or something. No? One of the things that I found interesting, you were saying, like with getting our industry recognized, by the government and stuff, it's always been the running joke that we're like the best kept secret industry that nobody knows about. And for the first time, this has actually hurt us because nobody knows about us. So I was talking to Dasher and Chris Griffith in one of our Zooms recently, and Chris was talking about how it's been interesting for him to get the feedback about not knowing that this industry was really as strong as it was.
Yeah, and also on the IAEE side, they have been working with the U.S. Department of Labor. Before, meetings and events were all lumped under hospitality and tourism. And as you know, we are not hospitality and tourism, we are business events. And so we have been able to finally get an employment code for meetings and events. So what that means is that eventually we're going to be able to actually track the number of people who are in the meetings and events sector. And that is not something that we've been able to do. It's, primarily estimates based on data from the Department of Labor, but it's not specific enough to business events.
Interesting. Go for it, Vince.
Yeah. One question I have, Cathy, is if you have any research or any studies done on attendees. I've heard plenty of data saying that exhibitors are really anxious to get back to show business. Show organizers are extremely anxious to get back. But attendees, we were even talking about before COVID, how attendees, especially the younger generations, are used to getting stuff done online. This couldn't have helped us. How are attendees, are they really going to need or want to get back to the trade show floor?
We have not done any surveys on the attendees. There are others that are doing that. I believe GES has done some work in that area, as well as Freeman. But SEER has not done any specific research on attendees.
Yeah, they must really enjoy listening to us when we get at it.
Well,
Jesus,
that's-
screaming.
Exactly. That's
Somebody's in the
exactly why I
background.
was
Somebody's not
saying
muted.
Somebody should mute.
it was the very last ones.
Hey, hi,
Tells
Julie
me.
Smith with GES. One of the things that we're finding with our clients is that they are doing survey on their own about their individual shows because the sentiments of different industries vary dramatically. And a lot of it has to do with how the question is asked, because you can ask a potential attendee, are you interested in attending a show? That's different from, does your company have a travel policy that allows you to go to a show right now? And do you have a budget to attend a show right now? And so a lot of it is how current the data is. I mean, you can see from the slides that Cathy was showing there how quickly the data is changing right now. So what's really critical is that there's fresh data. You know, a survey that you did 6 months ago is not going to be, you know, applicable. And how you understand the different profiles of your potential audiences, because different types of audiences have different risk behaviors. And then of course, you know, different individual company policies for travel right now. And some of those were set at the beginning of the year, and regardless of how much people want to go to events or shows, there may be a company policy or budget that prohibits it through the remainder of the calendar year.
John, go ahead. Oh, you're muted.
John, you able to unmute?
Maybe you could put the question in the chat.
Nice.
Uh,
Oh, he can't. All right.
Well, to fill the time, I just won a complete paid vacation on Carnival Cruises over the telephone. So I had to step out for a minute and take advantage of that.
Well, good for you.
COVID cruises.
Yes, yeah.
Well, you know, and that's another conversation that is being had, right? Carnival Cruises, I know the cruise line, they're going to start requiring proof of vaccination. I think, you know, we're still too early probably to know what the organizers might do. I think that, you know, they'll probably do testing, but which is very expensive. But will there be some type of requirement by some shows, proof of vaccination?
It would be interesting to see if that does happen, and then people who choose not to be vaccinated, how that will affect their being able to go to these things.
Yeah.
Well, they're starting to mass roll out vaccinations, and I have an appointment for mine next week, and I still feel young, so weird. I don't know why, how or why I got it, but there I go.
How'd you manage that, Vince?
I don't know. No idea.
So we have John's thing. I'm on the phone, not muted, but I don't know why you can't hear me. Oh, but there's an issue. But I think this issue of business liability protection is highly critical. There are thousands of risk-averse companies who just will not take the chance of allowing travel.
Yes, and so we know that before the election, McConnell was in favor of protections and the Democrats were not. But I know that this is an issue that, and of course, McConnell doesn't have the power that he did last year. But I know that this is one of the top priorities of both U.S. travel as well as the Exhibitions and Conferences Alliance. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's incredibly important.
Do you know if I know like the magic show had gone to Florida so they could have it, and I heard that they did testing to everybody every day. Do you think that that's going to be something more of the normal, or can they afford to do something like that even to make it safer?
From what I understand from sitting in on a webinar where some of those representatives from those shows were, that that is not something that they're going to be able to afford unless there is some type of government funding to help them. And one of the things that I learned from another call that I have with the Global Biorisk Advisory Council, and one of the reasons why I think it was so expensive was for them was because they had representatives from the local health department there to make sure that those tests were administered the way that they should be, because if they're administered the way they should be, then they're 98% effective. So they actually spent that extra money to have health department officials there.
And I believe it was a one-time test during the event, and then they got a wristband that they kept on for the entire event. But everybody who participated in the event, whether they were a worker, a facility personnel, an attendee, an exhibitor, had to have the test.
I don't know about Pete's question about business liability and policy cover. I don't know. You would have to look at the policy and see if it covers infectious diseases, pandemics and things like that. And if anybody that's writing policies currently, I can pretty much bet that that's not included in the policy.
All righty. Oh, Mobile World Congress. So we'll publish their rules for the show at the end of June. Includes testing through. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Well, and it's interesting because our colleagues in Asia, and one of the reasons why they've been able to get their shows back up and running, they do require testing. Many of them, if you're landing at the airport, they test you at the airport, and then once you arrive at the venue, you'll be tested again. And certainly it's not the U.S. where we are, very independent and very strong-willed and have strong opinions. But, certainly in Asia, Singapore, Korea, Taiwan, China, they've been very successful in getting shows up and running. So only mandating testing, no mention of vaccine required. Well, and part of the problem is that, I'm not even sure if in Barcelona and, parts of Europe that the vaccine rollout there hasn't been very smooth as some of the press that I've read, but I don't know if that's the case.
Yeah.
Did the show organizers or contractors tend to refund money back to exhibitors for the shows that canceled, or did they offer credits at future shows? Based on my anecdotal knowledge, that they were given the option of either canceling or rolling that over to the next event. I don't know of any that that did not offer credits or refunds. Julie's nodding her head yes, so it must be.
Yeah, hi, I'm Valerie. So I play kind of both sides of the field here. So I'm a trade show vendor, a trade show management firm, but then I also actually contract with some of my clients as their in-house events manager. And my experience over the last year, we had several events that rolled into virtual that would not give us a credit back. So we were forced to do virtual, which did not work. And I was just telling Antonia earlier, we spent probably 20,000 on one show, and that wouldn't allow us to roll over, and we got 10 leads. So 10 names, not even necessarily qualified leads. So there were those, because they were incurring costs with their virtual platform, they would not give us our money back. So we were basically stuck doing that. The other issue I had last year is some of the show services, which I totally do not understand. We had an issue with High Tech Electric, specifically in DC, that I had booked and paid for services for a show, and I didn't get my money back. So even though they didn't do anything, because the show hadn't even begun to start setting up. So we had that issue as well, where I had some show services that had already been prepaid and booked for shows that were coming up that never happened. So we lost money on both that side, and then obviously we're forced to do shows that we didn't necessarily want to do.
I think that show services policy is probably an anomaly, because I believe the majority of at least contractors, the policy was if work had already been done for you, the money was kept. So for instance, if you'd already shipped something and had been received, or if a custom booth had been made or a sign had been produced, but something like utilities where the work hasn't been done yet, typically that is would have been a full refund. And the majority of the money that was collected for most shows was returned unless the work had been done. I hadn't heard examples like that, the one you mentioned about money being forced to participate in a virtual event. I hope that was an anomaly. I think most groups that we've worked with at least provided options.
Yeah, and it may have been because it was, we do quite a few of European-based shows, and it's the biotech industry. And so I don't know if it was that, but we had probably 3 or 4 show organizers that wouldn't allow us to get out. Most of them, majority allowed us to roll over to 2021, but there were 3 or 4 at least. And I think most of them were probably UK or Europe based, but they wouldn't, because they were investing money in the platform, they wouldn't give us any money back. And we either participated or we lost the majority of our money. So.
Well, as you saw in my slides, it's very difficult to produce a live event and a digital event. And it's very expensive to produce that digital event. And I don't think that that's sustainable if you are going to try and fund that digital event through exhibits, or, exhibitors having a presence on that digital platform. If it's for education and things like that, then maybe, but it's very expensive to do, and to do it right.
Yeah, and that's the only, Antonia and I were talking about this earlier, is that's the one plus that I think did come out of all of this, is the education part of it. Is, conferences did get a lot more attendance because people don't have to travel. There is obviously not that commitment level necessarily, but everything's on demand. So if you do, in person, if you go and see, you want to go to a talk, you go to a talk, but you miss the other one that you wanted to go see if they're overlapping. So that's the one benefit I can see with conferences that I think they're going to have to figure out. And it sounds like they are trying to figure out how to do that. But with regards to sponsorship and the benefit for our clients, it's not there at all.
Yeah. The other thing that's very difficult with digital events is the data that comes out of it. We say that the data is very dirty and it needs to be cleansed, and you almost have to have a digital scientist to do that. It's something that's very intensive. For Expo, we contracted with a digital scientist, and that was in December, and it's March 18th, and we still don't have the final results. So, when someone visits an exhibitor and that person goes out and comes back in, that's 2 contacts that's recorded. So the information that the exhibitor may be given, may be inflated. based on the data that the organizer is getting back from that virtual platform.
Yeah, not all virtual platforms give you that data to begin with, right? Or it may be a setting. I feel like it's more the platform not being able to accommodate the data that the exhibitors are needing. So, there are a couple out there now that I've come across that do allow you to have visibility to people that are actually clicking into your booth. But most of them, at least my experience so far, we don't get that data. We only get data if they download content, if they engage with us via chat or email or something. But so it's just, and then they don't always give you all the same data. You have, they don't give you the full contact information. And so that's the other, side of it, is that you're having to make sure that the events that you're going to have all the contact information that you need, and not just the name, email, and company name, which some doesn't really help me. So it's the differences in all the platforms and how they're doing it and how they're structuring the data, and has been just all over the board.
Yeah. I think that in terms of, one of the things that we are seeing from the organizers is that they are waiting, because they certainly don't want to be put in the position of saying that they've canceled another event this year. Some of them, it was unavoidable. I was surprised to see that ASAE, the American Society of Association Executives, which is the organization that I belong to, that their show is in August, and they had already announced that they're canceling it for this year and doing something totally different. But I can tell you that, they really do want to hold these events. But as you also know, it's a huge financial commitment on their behalf as well, which is also one of the reasons why on the IAE side, canceling Expo, we did it 4 to 6 weeks out and totally pivoted to a fully virtual event. And the reason why we waited, because we were really hoping that the state of Kentucky was going to allow us to have more than the requirements were, but it came to a point where it was impracticable for us to be able to hold it. And we waited as long as we could until we had to start paying deposits, right? Once you have to start paying deposits down, or additional fees, and the contractor is incurring more costs that are going to need to be covered. So everybody is in such a difficult position, from the organizer to, certainly the exhibitor and the contractors. And it's why I think that, we just have to be really flexible and kind to one another for the next year or two. Certainly it is business, but, at the same time, be fair to one another.
Well, this was a great conversation, and thank you for everybody for tuning in. Does anybody have any other questions for Cathy at all, or any other comments from anybody? We had a couple things going in the chat room, but mostly just comments. Awesome.
Well, I'm gonna raise my hand really quick.
Oh, hey, Mindy.
Hi,
Sure.
hi, Cathy. Hey,
Hi,
everybody.
Mindy.
Good to see you, and thank you for your excellent content once again. I just want to let everybody know that we're expecting within the week to hear more news in California on guidelines for convention centers and meetings and events. And there's a lot of behind the scenes conversations happening, momentum, signatures from our legislators, really trying to activate and get something happening here. So we're all very optimistic that we'll hear something very soon. And I just wanted everyone to know that that's in the works right now.
And Mindy, if you need any help from the ECA, the Exhibitions and Conferences Alliance, with any letters or anything like that, let me know.
Okay.
Just so everybody knows, Mindy's with the Anaheim Convention Center, in case you guys aren't sure.
Sorry, I didn't introduce myself properly.
It's okay.
Zoom fail 101.
And she'll be with us next month to tell us more about what's going on with the opening and everything. So you guys can tune back in with that, and now you get to meet her. Oh, okay. Cool. Awesome. Well, this was great. I want to thank everybody for coming in. Cathy, thank you for making the time to tell us about this. And if people are asking if you can, you said about sharing the presentation. If you want to send it to me, I'm happy to send it out to everybody that signed up. And we'll be posting this on our website. So if anybody wants to watch it again, you'll be able to do that very shortly. And cool. Well, hopefully next time we see you, you'll have more good news for us. And
I hope so.
and you know, we'll keep an eye out for you in all these publications as you become more and more
know.
famous.
Crazy, crazy, crazy.
It's great. We're happy for you. You deserve it.
Thank you. All right. Well, listen, thank you, everybody. We're close enough to the weekend that I say have a good weekend.
Great. Thanks. You too. Talk to you soon.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.